My name is Martha Johnson. I'm 73 years old now. What I'm about to acquaint you ability change how you attending at your neighbors, or maybe alike your own family. This isn't accessible to allocution about, but some belief charge to be told. I grew up in Millfield, one of those babyish towns area everybody knew everybody. My amoroso formed at the Cardboard Commonnate, and Astronomic kept abode and accomplished Sunday school. We weren't rich, but we never went hungry. Activity was simple. Afresh. I met Bill at the 4th of July Abbey Barbecue in 1956. I was 18, cutting a dejected sundress my Astronomic had made. He was 23, aloof aback from Korea, handsome in his apprentice shirt with his beard slicked back. Aback he asked me to dance. My amore about jumped out of my chest. "You're the prettiest babe here," he said. His smile lit up his accomplished face. I bethink cerebration he looked like James Dean. Bill courted me proper, came to the abode to accommodated my parents, brought flowers, took me to the movies on Saturday nights. He had an acceptable job at the Harrison Branch Authoritative Car Parts. My amoroso admired him appropriate away. "That adolescent man has a future," Amoroso told me. "He's an adamantine worker. We got affiliated 6 months afterwards at Aboriginal Baptist." I wore Mama's Belle's dress with a blind my grandmother made. Our Belle's photo sat on our crimson for 45 years. In it, Bill is attractive at me like I'm the abandoned woman in the world. The first 2 years were aloof about perfect. We bought a little abode on Elm Street with a white blockade fence. Bill would accompany me agrarian flowers on his way home from work. I'd accept banquet waiting. After supper, we'd sit on the balustrade beat and allocution about our dreams. He capital 3 kids. I capital 4. We compromised on at atomic 3. Aback I got abundant with Jimmy, our first. Bill painted the nursery himself. Dejected with little boats forth the border. He congenital a bassinet from scratch. Anybody said I was the luckiest babe in town. Jimmy was built in the bounce of 1959. A beautiful baby boy with Bill's eyes and my nose. 8LB70. Bill anesthetized out cigars at work, at the hospital. He couldn't stop smiling. "You did good, Martha," he said, captivation Jimmy so carefully. "You did absolute good." That night, Bill went out with his assignment a company to celebrate. Came home late, stumbling. I'd never apparent him absolutely bashed before. Jimmy was crying. I'd been up for hours aggravating to get him to sleep. "Can't you shut that kid up?" Bill snapped. I was surprised. He'd never talked to me that way. "He's aloof athirst again," I said. "Babies cry, Bill. We'll accomplish him stop. A man needs his sleep." I took Jimmy to the nursery to augment him. Aback I came back, Bill was snoring. I figured it was aloof the booze talking. New fathers get abashed sometimes. That's what my Astronomic said. The abutting day, everything seemed back to normal. Bill kissed me goodbye afore work. Brought home flowers that evening. Apologized for actuality. Abbreviate with me. "Just tired, honey," he said. "This branch work's been boxy lately." I believed him. Capital to accept him. 2 canicule afterwards we brought Jimmy home. I made pot buzz for dinner, Bill's favorite. But Jimmy was colicky, errant all afternoon. By banquet time I was exhausted. The pot buzz was a little dry. "What's this?" Bill pushed his plate away. "I assignment all day and arise home to this." "I'm sorry," I said. "Jimmy's been fussy. I can accomplish you article else." "Damn it, Martha." He airtight his duke on the table so adamantine the dishes rattled. Jimmy started errant afresh from his bassinet in the corner. I went to pick Jimmy up. That's aback it happened. Bill effective my arm, spun me around. "Leave him. He needs to learn. He's aloof a baby, Bill. He doesn't." The bang came out of nowhere, adamantine beyond my face. The complete echoed in our little kitchen. My audacity burned. I tasted claret area my tooth cut the inside of my lip. Bill looked as abashed as I acquainted for a second. "Anyway, now attending what you fabricated me do," he said, his articulation low. Jimmy was agreeable now. I was frozen. Duke on my cheek. Tears arising up. Bill sat aback down, acicular at his plate. "Heat this up and shut that kid up." I did what he asked. Calmly shaking, I reheated his dinner, rocked Jimmy until he settled, didn't say a word. That night, Bill was candied again. Brought me an ice backpack for my face. Said he was sorry. Promised it would never arise again. Said the branch was laying bodies off. He was stressed. He'd had too abundant to drink. "I adulation you, Martha," he abreast in the dark. "You know I'd never aching you." "Not really." I told myself it was aloof this once that anybody has bad days, that marriage takes work. The aboriginal time he hit me was too canicule afterwards Jimmy was born. I told myself it would never arise again. I was amiss for 30 years. Things were acceptable afresh for a while afterwards, that aboriginal slap. Bill was added kind, bringing me little gifts. Allowance with Jimmy more. I started to think maybe it absolutely was a loofah ancient thing. Stress and alcohol, like he said. A fresh Carol came forth 2 years later. Our admirable babe with albino curls. Bill seemed blessed to accept his complete family, a boy and a girl. But I was annoyed all the time, demography affliction of 2 babies below 3. The abode wasn't consistently as apple pie as Bill liked. Banquet wasn't consistently on time. It started small. A acrid chat here, a tight anchor on my arm there. Afresh came the boost that beatific me into the coffer aback I couldn't acquisition his apple pie work shirt. I'm sorry, I said, alike admitting it wasn't my fault. I'd abstruse that I'm sorry sometimes chock full things from accepting worse. The abutting day, flowers again. Consistently flowers afterwards, red roses that bout the marks he left. By the time our 3rd child, Tommy, came in 1964, there was a pattern. Bill would be candied and absorbing for weeks. Then something would set him off. Banquet not ready, a bill I paid late, a child crying during his admired TV show. He'd explode, a fresh flowers, a fresh candied again like clockwork. I started ambuscade the bruises with connected sleeves in summer, architecture on my face, sunglasses at church. One Sunday afterward service, Pastor Roberts pulled me aside. Martha, is aggregate all appropriate at home? He asked quietly. My amore pounded. Addition had noticed. Maybe things could change. Bill and I are accepting some difficulties, I whispered. Pastor Roberts nodded. Marriage is adamantine work, Martha. The acceptable book says wives should abide to their husbands. Perhaps you charge to a jure added for patience. I nodded, smile arctic on my face. That's when I abstrused the abbey wouldn't advise me. Next, I approved my doctor afterwards. Bill bankrupt my wrist. I told Dr. Hopkins I'd fallen bottomward the stairs. He looked at me for a connected time. These stairs in your house, you assume to abatement bottomward them a lot. I started crying. I couldn't advise it. Dr. Hopkins sighed. Martha, whatever's accident at home, well, it's not my abode to baffle in a man's family, but be added careful, okay? That's a back I abstruse doctors wouldn't advise either. I anticipation about activity to Bill's parents. But his ancestor was cut from the aforementioned cloth. Already I saw him backhand Bill's mother at an ancestor's banquet for spilling gravy. No one said a word. His mother aloof, bankrupt up the mess, audacity reaning, eyes down. That's when I abstruse area Bill had abstruse it. I approved talking to my sister Janet on the buzz one day, aback the kids were at school. My lip was breached from the night before. You charge accept done article to accomplish him mad, she said. Bill's consistently so nice at ancestors' gatherings. He hit me because I used the amiss detergent, I said. Well, you apperceive how accurate men can be, Janet replied. Frank gets appealing a flame aback, I overcook his steak. Marriage isn't consistently roses and rainbows, Martha. That's a back I abstruse my own ancestors wouldn't understand. The kids grew up walking on eggshells. They abstruse which floorboards creaked and abhorred them aback. Amoroso was in a mood. They knew to be added quiet, added helpful, added area back. His car pulled in and the aperture slammed. Jimmy, our oldest, approved to angle up for me already aback he was 14. Bill had to gate me to the attic because I'd abandoned to aces up his dry cleaning. Leave her alone, Jimmy shouted, dispatch between us. Bill corruption him so. Adamantine, he fell ajoin the ceramics cabinet. The cut above his eye bare 7 stitches. We'll acquaint them you fell off your bike, Bill said on the way to the hospital. Right, Jimmy. Jimmy nodded, claret dripping down his face. Accidents arise in every family, Bill told the emergency allowance assistant with a smile. She smiled back. He could be so absorbing aback he bare to be. That's when the kids abstruse to be afraid too. I anticipation about abrogation 100 times, 1,000. But area would I go? I had no money of my own. Bill controlled our bank account. I'd never accomplished aerial school, never had an absolute job. I had 3 accouchement to augment and clothe. There were no women's shelters aback then, no hotlines to call, no abstinent orders. In our town, aback a woman larboard her husband. She became accountable of gossip, pity, and scorn. Can you accept she just absolved out on him and those poor children? I heard she wasn't befitting a able home. Well, alliance takes work. You can't aloof a cord up aback things get hard. Besides, Bill fabricated it ablaze what would arise if I approved to leave. You're mine, Martha, he'd whisper, his fingers digging into my shoulders. Till afterlife do us part. You try to booty my kids and I'll acquisition you. And afresh you'll be sorry. I believed him. Years passed. The children grew. The corruption got worse, not better. Atramentous eyes, burst ribs. Already a concussion that larbored me air sickness for days. Bill was bubbler added heavily. Accepting laid off. Award work. Getting laid off again. Anniversary time I was to blame. For his job troubles. For the Bill's axle up. For the children's problems in school. For everything. I got bigger at ambuscade it all. Became an able at makeup. At excuses. At smiling through pain. I'm aloof so clumsy became my adage at PTA meetings. Absolved appropriate into the door. I'd beam to the grocery abundance clerk. Oh, this old thing I'd say about a casting or a sling. Aloof not as adolescent as I acclimated to be. I did not perceive it had a name then. Domestic abandon that came later. To us it was aloof life. Just marriage. Aloof the way things were. A back amoroso died in 1975. He larbored me a small inheritance. $10,000 from his activity allowance. And the auction of the ancestor's home. It wasn't a fortune. But it was the aboriginal money that had any time been absolutely mine. I'll accumulate it safe for us, Bill said, hand outstretched. I hesitated. Aloof for a moment. The assault that night was the affliction yet. 2 absurd ribs, a confused shoulder, my eye swollen shut. The abutting day, I acted the analysis over to him. An anniversary later, he lost it all at the clue action on horses. Aback he told me he was crying. Actually crying. I was aggravating to bifold it, he said, to accomplish a bigger activity for us. That night, as I lay in bed affliction everywhere, article afflicted central me. When he took my bequest from Amoroso and gambled it all away, article central me died and article abroad was born. That night, lying in bed with my ribs aching, I remembered my grandmother. Granny May wasn't my real grandmother. She was my mother's aunt who aloft her afterwards my absolute grandparents died in a fire. But to me, she was consistently Granny May. Granny May lived in a tiny abode at the bend of boondocks with a garden abounding of plants nobody else grew. Some association alleged her a witch, but never to her face. They still came to her back door at aphotic aback the doctor's medicines didn't work. She knew which herbs could accompany bottomward a fever, affluence a cough, or help a colicky babyish sleep. Plants accept power, she told me already aback I was about 12. We were in her garden. The air candied with lavender and mint. God put the cure for every ailment into article growing from the earth. I bethink her asperus calmly spotted with age but abiding as she mixed her teas and tinctures. Some plants calm the mind, she said, crushing broiled leaves amid her fingers. Some advice you sleep, some ablaze the head, and some... She looked at me with those aciculate, dejected eyes. Some assure women aback there's no one abroad to assure them. I didn't understand what she meant aback then. Anticipation she was talking about burglars or strangers on aphotic roads. One day you ability need to bethink this, she said, assuming me a babyish jar of brownish powder. This is from the Valerian route, alloyed with a few added things. It'll accomplish a developed man Betty Bye like the comatose for hours. Not enough to annihilate him, apperception you. Aloof abundant to get abroad if you charge to. She showed me how to accomplish it. How abundant to use. How to beard the aftertaste with coffee or candied tea. Why would I charge that, Granny? I asked, innocent as a lamb. She looked sad. Afresh the apple isn't consistently affectionate to women, child. And sometimes the crisis isn't out there in the dark. Sometimes it sleeps appropriate beside you. Granny May died aback I was 16. Before Bill, afore I understood, now lying in that bed with Bill comatose beside me, her words came aback ablaze clear. The anamnesis so aciculate I could about aroma her garden. The abutting morning, afterwards Bill larboard for work, I went up to the attic. Found an old block of things my mother had accustomed me afterwards Granny May passed. Inside, captivated in a achromatic dishcloth, was her notebook. Pages yellowed with age, abounding with her neat askance handwriting. Recipes for aggregate from cough abstract to puces. And there on folio 43, the compound for her Betty Bye powder. Valerian root, chamomile, article alleged skullcap. A few added herbs I'd never heard of. Absolute measurements, instructions for brewing and drying. I closed the book, a moray pounding. Was I absolutely because this? The bruises on my ribs throbbed, answering my question. Over the abutting few weeks, I started my research. Told Bill I was demography a Abbey Lady's agronomical chic on Tuesdays. Instead, I collection to the next town over to a bloom element abundance run by a woman with connected gray braids. Looking for article specific? She asked aback. She saw me beneath the jars of broiled herbs, just absorbed in accustomed remedies, I said. Articulation accidental, admitting my antagonism heart. My grandmother acclimated to accomplish her own. Smart woman, your grandmother, she nodded. The old means assignment bigger than people think. I bought my Aboriginal food that day. Not aggregate I needed, but abundant to start. Hid them in an abandoned coffee can in the barn abaft Bill's fishing tackle. My abutting stop was the public library area I arrested out books on herbal medicine. The librarian smiled. Internist in accustomed remedies is absolutely growing, she said. My own mother swore by chamomile for Betty Bye troubles. My grandmother, too, I replied. It wasn't a lie. I apprehend those books awning to cover, abstruse about dosages, effects, risks. I wasn't aggravating to annihilate Bill. God forgive me for a like cerebration it. But I bear to apperceive absolutely what I was doing. The final additive was the hardest to find. I concluded up calling Aunt Judith, my mother's cousin, who'd abstruse some of Granny May's ways. She lived 3 hours abroad in the mountains. Martha, is that really you? Her articulation crackled over the buzz line. It's been years, child. I know, Aunt Judith. I'm sorry. I've been busy. Married activity befitting you occupied, I expect. How's that bedmate of yours? I swallowed hard. Fine. Aloof fine. Listen, Aunt Judith. I was activity through some of Granny May's things, her compound book, and I wondered if you ability accept some of her appropriate tea blend, the one for sleeping problems. A connected blackout followed. Sleeping problems, she afresh slowly, or sleeping bedmate problems. My animation caught. I don't apperceive what you mean. Addition silence. Afresh arise see me Saturday. Acquaint him you're visiting your ailing aunt. I'll accept what you need. I hung up the phone, calmly trembling. That Saturday, I told Bill I bear to visit my ailing aunt. What, aunt? He accepted suspicious. Aunt Judith, Mama's cousin. You met her at Jimmy's graduation. She's accepting Amore trouble. The lie came easily, he grunted. Be aback by dinner. I collectioned the 3 hours to Aunt Judith's babyish house, nestled in the dejected Ridge Mountains. She was cat and mouse on the porch, gray beard in a bun, eyes knowing. She didn't ask about my crumbling atramentous eye, or the way I winced aback she hugged me. Aloof led me inside, sat me bottomward at her kitchen table and caked tea. Granny May consistently knew, she said, active honey into her cup, about your mama's daddy, how he'd arise home bashed and use his fists, how your grandmother would awning the bruises with crumb and scarves. I stared at her. I never knew that. Not article association talked about back then. Not article they elocution about now either. She sipped her tea. Is it bad, Martha? The simple catechism bankrupt article in me. 30 years of silence crumbled. Yes, I whispered. Afresh begin myself cogent her everything. The first slap, the burst bones, the money, the threats, the fear. She listened without judgment. Afterwards, the platitudes others had offered. When I finished, tears streaming bottomward my face, she stood and absolved to a cedar cabinet. Granny May helped your grandmother once, she said, demography out a babyish bolt pouch. And now I'm allowance you. She placed it in my hands. This is the aftermost ingredient, the one that masks the taste. Be accurate with the amount. Too little, he'll aftertaste it. Too much. She didn't finish. I don't appetite to annihilate him, I said quickly. I apperceive that, child. This isn't about murder. It's about affairs time. Time to think, time to plan. Maybe time to get away? I abashed the pouch. Acknowledge you. As I was leaving, she pressed a babyish key into my palm. Assurance drop box. Aboriginal National Coffer in Asheville. Box 217, there's $500 in there. Emergency money from Granny May to the women in her family. Aloof in case. I hugged her, bound, admitting my ribs. I don't apperceive how to acknowledge you. Don't acknowledge me, she said. Aloof, be ready. Driving home, the herbs and key hidden in my purse. I acquainted article I hadn't acquainted in decades. Hope. I had endured 30 years. I was an activity to booty one added day. Back home, I hid the herbs in an old Band-Aid tin in my bed-making basket. Bill never looked in there. Anticipation bed-making was women's business below his notice. I kept Granny May's compound book tucked central my Bible in the nightstand. Addition abode, he'd never look. That night at dinner, Bill complained about the meatloaf actuality too dry. Threw his bowl adjoin the wall, alleged me useless. The usual. But this time, as I bankrupt up the mess, article was different. I had a secret, a plan forming. The weight of helplessness wasn't absolutely so crushing. Over the abutting few weeks, I aggregate what I needed. Ground the broiled herbs with the adhesive and a braid while Bill was at work. alloyed them according to Granny May's precise instructions. The crumb angry out accomplished as a braid and the blush of cinnamon, I stored it in an abandoned bolus canteen labeled Adamant Supplements. Hid its central a box of feminine articles below the bathroom sink. Addition abode Bill would never check, but accepting the crumb and application it were two altered things. The moral weight of what I was because kept me up at night. Was this a sin? Would God absolve me? Was I no bigger than Bill if I did this? I prayed for guidance, admiration beside our bed while Bill snored. Lord, appearance me the appropriate path, I whispered. I don't appetite to aching him. I aloof appetite the affliction to stop. No all-powerful acknowledgement came. Just the accustomed complete of Bill's animation and my own heartbeat. I needed to allocution to someone. Not family. They wouldn't understand. Not the pastor. He deduced scripture about wheelie submission. I anticipation about calling the police. But the one time I'd approved that years ago, they'd aloof talked to Bill Mantaman on the porch. Told him to air-conditioned off a bit. Things got worse afterwards they left. Afresh I remembered Helen Cooper. We'd gone to Ariel Academy Calm before she confused to California. She'd arise back to Millfield 5 years ago, afterwards her divorce. Aperture a babyish bookstore downtown. Bodies talked, of course, a divorced woman active her own business. But Helen never seemed to affliction what bodies thought. The abutting day I chock-full by her shop. Cooper's covers. The little anxiety jingled as I entered. Helen looked up from abaft the adverse and smiled. Martha Johnson, what a nice surprise. Her eyes lingered on the crumbling abrasion abreast my temple that architecture hadn't absolutely covered. Her smile dimmed, but she didn't comment. Aloof browsing, I said, assuming to appraise the new releases. We fabricated babyish allocution about the weather, about her store, about Boondocks gossip. When the aftermost chump left, Helen bound the aperture and addled the assurance to closed. Come on back, she said, arch me to a babyish appointment abaft the abundance room. I was aloof about to accept some tea. She put the kettle on a hot plate, took out 2 mugs. So, she said finally, how bad is it? The artlessness of her catechism abashed me. What do you mean? Helen's eyes were affectionate but unflinching. Martha, we've accepted anniversary added aback we were kids. I've a parent you at the grocery store cutting sunglasses central in winter. I've a parent you avoid a back edition raises their voice. And I know what those connected sleeves in July are covering. I stared at my hands, clumsy to speak. My ex-husband bankrupt 3 of my ribs afore I left. Helen continued, her articulation bulk of fact. Furrowed my cheekbone twice. That's why I went to California, to get away. I looked up, surprised. Helen had consistently seemed so confident, so put together. I didn't know, I whispered. Nobody does. That's the problem, isn't it? We all accumulate the abstruse for them, for ourselves, out of abashment or abhorrence or both. The kettle whistled. Helen caked hot water into the mugs. I'm not anticipation you, she said, handing me a cup. I backward for 12 years. You do what you have to do to survive. Article about her understanding, her abridgment of judgment, bankrupt the damn central me. I told her everything. Well, about everything, not about the powder. Aloof about Bill, about my fears, about activity trapped. Helen listened, comatose occasionally. Aback I finished, she refilled our cups. Have you anticipation about leaving? She asked. Where would I go? What would I alive on? There are places now, shelters, organizations that advise women like us. In Millfield, I befuddled my head. Everyone knows everyone. Bill would acquisition me. Helen sighed. You're appropriate about that. I had to go 3 states abroad before I acquainted safe. We sat in blackout for a moment. What about the children? She asked. Grown and gone. Jimmy's in the army. Carol's affiliated in Tennessee. Tommy's in college in Raleigh. Do they apperceive about Bill? I shrugged. They grew up with it. They know, but we don't allocution about it. They accept their own lives now. You could go to one of them and bring this to their doorstep. Except Bill chase me there? No. Helen accomplished beyond the table. Awkward my hand. Afresh, what will you do? I hesitated afresh absentatively to trust her. I'm alive on something. A way to buy some time. Accomplish some changes. She advised my face. Afresh nodded slowly. Whatever it is, be careful. Men like that aback, they feel their ascendancy slipping. I know. The bruises from last week's assignment still HD below my blouse. Before I left, Helen wrote article on a allotment of paper, a phone number. This is my sister in Atlanta. If you charge about to go anytime, day or night, she apprenticed it into my hand. Acknowledge you. I said, tucking it into my purse, abutting to my hidden key. Walking home, I acquainted abnormally peaceful. Talking to Helen had antiseptic things. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. What was happening wasn't normal, wasn't right, wasn't my fault. That night, I finalized my plan. Bill consistently had 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Black, 2 sugars. The crumb would go into his second cup. The one he drank while Annual the cardboard afterwards, the Aboriginal had woken him up. According to Granny May's notes, it would booty about 20 Annual to work. I laid out my clothes for the next day, put the Assurance drop box, key, and Helen's sister's cardinal in my wallet, arranged a babyish bag, and hid it in the back of the linen closet. Aggregate was ready. That Thursday morning, aback he sat bottomward for his coffee. My calmly were shaking, not from fear, but from hope. Thursday morning dawned ablaze and clear. I woke afore the alarm, Amore racing. Today was the day. Bill was still comatose beside me, his face peaceful in sleep. He consistently looked so accustomed to back he slept. About kind. I slipped out of bed agilely and dressed in the bathroom. Chose a dejected dress Bill had consistently admired and adequate shoes I could airing in if needed. Applied architecture anxiously to awning the yellowing bruise on my cheekbone. In the kitchen, I went through my accepted morning routine, started the coffee, alloyed pancake batter, set the table. Aggregate had to assume. Normal. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. I took bottomward Bill's admired mug, the one that said, "World's Greatest Dad." A Father's Day allowance from the kids years ago. It had been true once. Aback they were actual little, afore they abstruse to be abashed of him. Bill had been a acceptable daddy. Accomplished Jimmy to fish, congenital Carol a dollhouse, took Tommy to baseball games. I caked his first cup of coffee, black, 2 sugars, put it on the table at his abode abutting to the bankrupt newspaper. My calmly were abiding as I fabricated the pancakes, addled them one by one. I'd done this thousands of mornings, but today was different. Today Aggregate would change. The stairs creaked. Bill was up. I tensed automatically. Afresh affected myself to relax. Pour the orange juice. Cast edition pancake. Normal. Everything normal. "Morning," he grunted, ambiguity to the table in his bathrobe and slippers. "Good morning," I said, voice deliberately light. "Sleep well?" He grunted again, best up his coffee cup. I watched from the bend of my eye as he drank bisected of it in one go, afresh accomplished for the newspaper. I put a plate of pancakes in advance of him. 3 with adulate melting on top. Aloof how he liked them. "Syrup's on the table," I said, axis aback to the stove. While his attention was on the bi-weekly and pancakes, I able his additional cup of coffee. The crumb was in my apron pocket in a babyish envelope. I'd abstinent it 3 times adjoined Granny May's recipe, aloof abundant to accomplish him Betty by acutely for a few hours no more. Heart pounding, I slipped the crumb into the beginning coffee, afflicted it until it attenuated completely, added the 2 sugars. The appropriate additive from Aunt Judith was declared to affectation any abnormal taste. I brought the additional cup to the table aloof, as Bill was finishing his pancakes. "More coffee?" I asked, the Annual of a admirable wife. He nodded afterwards, attractive up from the sports section. I set the cup bottomward and took his empty plate. "These weren't bad," he said, the abutting affair to a acclaim he'd given me in months. "Acknowledge you," I replied, axis to ablution the dishes. At the sink, I watched the clock, counted the minutes. According to Granny May, it would booty about 20 Annual for the herbs to booty effect. Bill kept Annual his paper, occasionally sipping his coffee. At the 15-minute mark, I noticed him blinking adamantine like he was accepting agitation absorption on the print. He befuddled his arch slightly. "Paper's blurry," he muttered. "Eyes charge, be tired." I fabricated a non-committal noise, heart racing. It was working. A minute later, he yawned widely. "Didn't sleep good?" he said, words hardly slurred. "Feel affectionate of strange." "Maybe you're coming bottomward with something," I suggested, dehydration a bowl with methodical care. Bill stood up, swaying a little. "Maybe anticipate I'll sit in my armchair for a bit." He confused to the living room. I heard the brook of his recliner as he sat bottomward heavily. The bi-weekly rustled, afresh alone to the floor with a bendable thump. I waited, bristles added Annual afore activity to analysis on him. Bill was angled in the recliner, head lulled to one side, aperture hardly open. His animation was abysmal and regular. I coiled a duke in advance of his face. No response. "Bill," I said softly. Afresh louder. "Bill." Nothing. aloof the steady acceleration and abatement of his chest. I apprenticed 2 fingers to his wrist, begin his pulse, able and steady. He was just acutely asleep, absolutely as Granny May's compound promised. For a moment, I just stood there attractive at him. This man I'd married, this man I'd loved, this man I'd feared for 3 decades. Abandoned now at my benevolence the way I'd been at his for so long. A aberrant activity done over me. Not triumph, not exactly. Relief, maybe. And article else. Power. For the aboriginal time in 30 years, I had the power. I could aching him if I wanted to. Could booty a knife from the kitchen drawer. Could asphyxiate him with a pillow. Could artlessly airing out the aperture and never come back. The anticipation afraid me. I wasn't an agitated person. Wasn't a murderer. That wasn't why I'd done this. I took an abysmal breath, ashore to the plan. First, I alleged the branch area Bill worked. "This is Martha Johnson," I said when the agent answered. "Bill won't be in today. He's a rise bottomward with something. Probably the flu." Next, I retrieved my hidden bag from the linen closet. Added a few added things. The photo anthology with pictures of the children. My mother's locket. My Bible. The assurance Dropbox key was in my purse. Forth with the $83 I'd managed to save in babyish bills hidden in my sewing basket over the accomplished 3 years. Afresh, I went to Bill's board in the den, the one I wasn't declared to touch. Begin his checkbook in the top drawer. The coffer annual assuming their collective account balance. $4,279. His wallet was on the chiffonier upstairs. Inside his coffer agenda and $120 in cash. I took $100 from the wallet. Abrogation the $20. Abundant that he wouldn't be absolutely stranded. Not abundant that he could calmly arise afterwards me. With trembling hands, I wrote out an analysis to myself for $2,000. Bisected the money in the account. Active it with Bill's signature. Afterwards, 40 years of marriage, I could coin it perfectly. It wasn't absolutely forgery, I told myself. It was our money. I'd becoming my share, affable and charwoman and adopting his children and constant his fists. I looked at the clock. Almost 900 a.m. Bill had been out for about bisected an hour. According to Granny's notes, he'd Betty by for at atomic 4 added hours. Enough time. Before leaving, I arrested on him already more, still animation steadily. I covered him with the Afghan from the sofa, not out of affection, but to accumulate anyone from seeing him through the window and apprehensive what was wrong. I best up my bag and purse, took one last attending about the abode that had been my Bastille for 40 years. Afresh, I stepped al fresco and bankrupt the aperture abaft me. He burst on the kitchen floor, and for the aboriginal time in decades, I could breathe afterwards fear. I absolved 3 blocks to the bus stop, consistently attractive over my shoulder. Alike admitting I knew Bill was complete comatose in that recliner, I couldn't agitate the activity that he ability arise at any moment, ashamed and furious. The morning was air-conditioned for May. Birds were singing in the maple copse that lined our street. Mrs. Peterson was watering her roses. She coiled as I passed. "Off to the store, Martha," she called. "Just running some errands," I replied, aggravating to complete accustomed admitting the beating of my heart. The Cardinal 7 bus accustomed appropriate on schedule. I climbed aboard, paid my fare, and sank into a bench abreast the back. Abandoned aback the bus pulled abroad did I acquiesce myself to breathe fully. First stop, Aboriginal National Bank. I approached the teller's window, calmly abandoned, slightly trembling as I presented Bill's check. "I'd like to banknote this, please," I said, sliding it beyond the adverse fourth with my ID. The adolescent teller, couldn't be added than 25, looked at the check, afresh at me. $2,000 is an ample amount, Mrs. Johnson. Would you like that in abate bills? I hadn't anticipation about that. Yes, please. 20s would be fine. She nodded, but I noticed her glance against the manager's office. My amore skipped. Is there a problem? I asked, aggravating to accumulate my articulation steady. Aloof one moment, she said, walking over to the manager's desk. They batten quietly, both attractive in my direction. I advised simply walking out, but that would abandoned accession added suspicion. The manager, Mr. Garvey, came over. I'd accepted him for years. He and Bill acclimated to angle together. Good morning, Martha, he said with an able smile. That's absolutely a sum you're abandoning today. Yes, I agreed, apperception racing. Bill and I are assuredly replacing our furnace. The old one's on its aftermost legs. The lie came easily. Mr. Garvey nodded. Smart to pay cash these days. Contractors accord discounts. He motioned to the teller. Go ahead and action Mrs. Johnson's transaction, Linda. I appear an animation I hadn't accomplished I was holding. Minutes later, I absolved out with an envelope absolute $120 bills tucked deeply in my purse. I additionally had the key to our assurance drop box, a FIRA aperture in my pocket. May I admission our box as well? I'd asked already. The banknote was sorted. The administrator hadn't batted an eye. Of course, Mrs. Johnson, you're listed as a co-owner. I'd never absolutely apparent the central of the box before. Bill always handled that. Central was absolutely what I expected. The accomplishment to our house, birth certificates, allowance policies, and what I hadn't expected. A assemblage of cash wrapped in an elastic band. $5,000 in 100 bills. My Duke befuddled as I counted it. Bill's emergency fund. The money he'd consistently said we didn't accept a back Tommy Bear braces or Carol Bear a prom dress. I larbored the abstracts but took the cash. It was our money afterwards all. Money that should accept gone to our children's needs. I'd accomplish abiding they got their share. A budding stop, the Greyhound station. I bought a one-way admission to Atlanta, area Helen's sister lived. The bus wouldn't leave until 2 p.m., which gave me time for my abutting task. From a pay buzz at the station, I alleged Jimmy at the Army Abject in Georgia. Mom. His articulation was surprised. I rarely alleged during the day. Aggregate, okay? Everything's fine, honey, I said, afraid at how calm I sounded. I aloof capital to hear your voice. We talked for a few annual about annihilation important. His training, the weather, a babe he'd met. Afresh, I took a abysmal breath. Jimmy, I'm authoritative some changes. I've larbored your father. Blackout on the line. Afresh for absolute this time. The this time stung. I'd threatened to leave a 4 in moments of desperation. Had arranged a bag once, but Bill had begun it, destroyed it, and given me 2 burst fingers as punishment. Yes, for real. I'm actually at the bus abject now. Acknowledge God, he breathed, afresh stronger. Area, are you going? Do you charge money? Do you accept a safe place? The abatement in his articulation brought tears to my eyes. I'm activity to break with the acquaintance in Atlanta for a while. I accept some money. I'll be okay. Does he apperceive yet? Jimmy's articulation had hardened. Not yet. He'll acquisition out soon. Addition silence. Did you aching him, Mom? No acumen in his voice. Aloof concern. No, I said firmly. I would never. He's aloof sleeping. Jimmy didn't ask for details. Maybe he didn't appetite to know. I'll arise see you as anon as I can get leave, he promised. Accord me the abode when you're settled. I will. And Jimmy, don't acquaint your ancestor area I am. Not ever. I wouldn't dream of it, he said softly. Next, I alleged Carol in Tennessee. Mama. Her articulation was wary. Carol consistently seemed to apprehend bad account back. I called. What's wrong? I afreshed the chat I'd had with Jimmy. Carol's acknowledgement was different. You left, Daddy, but whose activity to booty affliction of him? Whose activity to baker and clean? Worry abounding her voice. He's a grown man, Carol. He can booty affliction of himself. But Mama, alliance is forever.